It says, let's go to the right screen first. The secretary starts on an annual salary of $30,000 with annual increments of $2,000. Okay, so that's a pretty simple setup. Now, the first thing that I would encourage you to do, it's not necessary, but it's sort of like the series and sequences equivalent of drawing a diagram. I want you to write with me, there are two numbers in here and each of them has a significant meaning. I want you to write those with me so that you don't have to refer back to the question when you're actually doing the working. Okay, so what are the two numbers and what do they refer to? Give me the first one. $30,000. Now, before I write down $30,000, I want to know what it is. I don't want this to be a string of disconnected numbers and equations. I want words, just like the question uses words, to tell me what's going on. So what is 30,000? What does it signify? It's the starting salary. That's what it is. So I'm just going to write that. Starting salary, 30,000. Little point of trivia, I used to put commas in between, you know, when you got big numbers like 30 million or something like that, or 30,000, I used to put commas between the groups of three, and that's a pretty Australian convention. But then I learned that in Europe, they use commas to indicate decimal points. So that's $30 in Europe, which is weird and confusing. It's sort of like driving on the right-hand side of the road instead of the left-hand side of the road. Let's just be different for difference's sake. So that's why you'll find I don't write commas in between my things. I just write gaps. Just a little point. It's not like you're ever going to be submitting this to some mathematician in Europe, but surprisingly, all kinds of people watch these videos. So I'm going to be a little more conscious of it. That's the starting salary. What was that other figure that's important? 2,000. Now, what would you call that? It's the pay rise. It's the increase. I think the word, is they use the word increment? Is that the word they use? So that's not a very common word, but it's worth getting used to because you'll see it in this topic. Increment just means this is what it's going up by each time. So 2,000, if I recall. All right, so we have the setup. There's our diagram. So now they ask us two questions. What's the first question? Read it with me. Part A, find his annual salary and his total earnings at the end of 10 years. So it's a bit of a double-barreled question, okay? Both of them though, part A, both parts of this question have to do with at the end of 10 years. So I'm going to write that. Now, you might think it's slightly excessive that I use so many words. Trust me, the classic error of students in this topic is that they don't use enough words. I know we try to be concise, but by doing too many shortcuts, even something like at the end of 10 years, rather than just writing 10 years, believe me, it makes a difference, okay? What are the two things they're asking for? I think they're asking for what is the salary, is that right? What is the salary? And what are his total earnings? Meaning, at the end of the 10th year, what has he earned in that year? And then at the end of the 10th year, what has he earned all over year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Okay, so let's just do them one at a time. What is his salary? Well, how are we going to work this out? We know where it starts, $30,000, and it's going to increase at the end of 10 years. How many times will it have increased? Yeah, well, year 1 will be 30,000. And then year 2 will be that plus 2,000. Then year 3 will be plus 2,000 again, plus 2,000 again. So in total, you will have added 9 lots of the pay rise. Does that make sense? That's n minus 1. Does that ring a bell? So this is 9 times 2,000. Yeah, are you happy with that? So this is nice and you don't even need to calculate it for this part. We will shortly. So this is 30,000 plus 18,000. Do you need to write this in between line before you get to the next one? Probably not, but it's incumbent on you to communicate clearly what is going on, and I don't see that there's a huge time saving, and I just don't trust my own arithmetic if I went straight to the answer, but I'm happy with this. Is that okay? My number's all right? Quick sense check, does it make sense? Is it a reasonable number? It's increased, it hasn't decreased, it's in the right ballpark. Happy? Okay, that was the first part of A. What's the second part? What are they asking for? Yeah, total wealth. How much has he accrued over this time, right? So I guess we would use the phrase they use, which is total earnings. Let me say it again. Use words, please. Don't just make this like x or y, or even worse, just the numbers on their own. These are two completely separate things. So tell me that they are two completely separate things. The total earnings are made up of his first year's income and his second and his third, because apparently in this weird world of a question, he's a boring person who spends no money. So we start with the first one. And because we're doing all 10 years, right, well, we know what happens the next year. There's an increment of 2,000, right? I'm trying to form a pattern here, so think back to series and sequences. How many terms do I need to form a pattern? 3. And you can see the series is starting to form. I've got 1, 2, 3 terms. It's not an infinite series though, it has an and. So even though I go dot, 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 I'm going to finish at a final term. What's the final term? Yeah, I just worked this out, right? This is why there's an order to it. So I'm going to finish at 48,000. Okay, now, little minor note. Here, you have formed an AP, right? Do you recognize it? It's going up by the common difference. And I'm going to, rather than just add them all up, because I have a calculator, but I don't really want to punch in 10 numbers, I'm going to use the fact that I know how to work out the sum of an AP. In order to use the formula, I want to say that I know where this is coming from. So I'm actually going to, and I'm literally going to do this on the side. I'm going to say, this is an AP. Like, I'm going to say that phrase. Later on, when we identify geometric progressions, I'll say, this is a GP, right? What kind of features define an AP? There are 3 particular things. There's the first term, which in this case is 30,000. There's a common difference, which in this case is 2,000. And then there's the number of terms. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I'm just thinking of different numbers in my head. And then there's the number of terms, right? How many terms? 10 years. I could write n equals 10 at this point, but I'm going to write 10 terms instead. If you wait about 3 lessons, you'll see why I didn't write n equals 10. Just remind me if I don't say it. Okay, so I have everything I need. Now, I have 2 choices here. There are 2 ways to state the sum of an AP. Do you remember what the 2 ways are? Let's write it up the top. Sum of the first n terms. There are 2 different formulas for it. I'll give you a clue. They both start with n on 2. Before you tell me the rest of the formula, do you know why they both start with n on 2? What does n on 2, like, it represents this little algebraic numerical trick that we did in here when we were trying to come up with this formula. If there are 10 terms, n on 2 of course is what in this case? It's 5. What's the significance of 5 to this? Do you remember how we came up with an AP? Do you remember we did this, and then we did this? I'm missing the one that's there, and then we did this. So what am I doing? I'm pairing up, and then I meet in the middle, and each one of the pairs equals the same amount, right? So this is the number of pairs if you were to match everything up. Now, there are 2 things that come after this. There are 2 different versions. Here's a long one, and here's a short one. Oh, think back. And you do have this on your reference sheet, I should point out, but as Extension 1 students, I don't think you should need the reference sheet for this one. Have I bought you enough time to try and remember what the sum of an AP is? Anyone want to try either one? Either one is fine. Yeah, Shalini.
2a plus n minus 1d.
2a plus n minus 1d. Nailed it. Now, before we explain where this comes from, it might help if anyone remembers the shorter one, because it explains where all the terms come from in this one. Anyone? The first plus the last, which, do you remember I pointed this out before? The first term, A, is the first letter of the alphabet, but because we love being inconsistent, we call the last one L usually, because, anyway. Okay, so now you can see where this comes from, right? You see where it is? One of these A's is this, but of course the last term will be A plus n minus 1d. It's the last term, one lot of the beginning, and then n minus 1 lots of the difference. So tell me, which of these would you prefer to use in this case? Because you really can use either. I think I'll use the second one. It's just less numbers, right? So I've got 10 on 2. There's my n on 2. They both have it. Here's my first term. And then here's my last term. Now, one of the phrases you might hear is that you want to write this solution such that someone who doesn't know what you're doing can see where your logic is. And this is why I bothered to write this. If you just saw this and then it went straight to this line, that looks like magic to me. Like how, where, what? We've done a lot of work to know why that is the case, and we have that as a formula, it's established. But to know that you can use this formula, you want to justify the fact that this is the key piece of information, that it's an AP, so I can use the AP formula. Okay, what do we got here? 5 by 78,000. I was in a Year 8 lesson yesterday which taught me some methods to think about how to break this apart rather than resort to using my calculator. 5 times 7 is 35, so that's 350,000. The 8 will give me 40,000, so I think that's 390,000, and that's in dollars. Are you happy with that? Now, of course, you have a calculator there. But the reason why I'm pushing on this is because when I look at this, I can do it in my head. And the more you do things in your head, the more you'll be able to work out later when you do use a calculator, is that answer reasonable or not? Like if your brain can't do it, then you've got no chance really of knowing whether you're in the right track or otherwise. That was part A. How's your brain going? Like, are you okay remembering this AP stuff? None of this is new. Like you knew this, you knew those. You just need to remember them and apply them to this context. That was question A. Can you have a look at B for me? I've warmed you up. Can I give you a couple of minutes head start to try and interpret it, work out what kind of knowledge you would use to try and solve that question, and then we'll do it on the board together. Just have a go at part B. I gave you a head start. It's quite all right if you're not there yet, but there aren't too many lines of working here. The key is to work out what piece of knowledge will help you actually form the right equations. So they ask you, I think from memory, what year, what exact year will he get to, is it 42? $42,000 as his annual salary, right? So what arithmetic progression knowledge am I going to use here? It's not about a sum, it's about a particular term, right? So do you remember what the formula is for the particular term? We actually referred to it like 2 minutes ago. A plus, yep, so you can say this either way because it's multiplication, but we tend to say it like this because we mean that many lots of the common difference, okay? Now, we have values for each of these. We want the salary, that's the term, to be 42,000. Yeah? And we know what all of the other pieces are with one exception. What's the piece we're actually trying to find? N. So let's put in all the other bits. This is 30. This is the part that you don't know. And then my common difference, of course, is still 2,000. So it's just routine algebra from here. You just need to change the subject, but you might as well help me through it. Take away 30 from both sides, so that leaves you with 12,000. Now what do? We'll divide. I might as well get the n back on the left-hand side where it belongs, so that gives you 6, and then you have an answer, okay? Probably worth noting, again, the question is in words, so I should at least provide my answer in words. Probably this is the minimum I would expect. A sentence would be nicer, and it will become more important later on when you actually need to describe what is happening and not just provide a time. Okay? But does that make sense? Was that all right?